Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Orbit. Today we have Alyssum. Alyssum, I don't know how to pronounce your last name.
It's hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Quaglia.
Quaglia.
It means quail in Italian.
Nice. Very and tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? What have you been up to?
I'm an industrial designer. I also studied art history in school, so that kind of is my secret soulful passion that burns underneath all the design work that I do. Um, in quarantine, I've had some time to myself to work on, my website and other things like that, and been catching up on some reading, stuff like that. Yeah.
Very cool. Are you currently working or?
Yeah, I was working. Well, Connor, are you editing this?
Yeah, it's very, no.
Can we start over?
I mean, I can edit this part out if you want. What do you need?
I'm just like so embarrassed right now. I'm like, ugh. So, because that's actually a tricky question about whether or not I'm working. Because my position got paused indefinitely because of the coronavirus. So it was like, so no, I'm not working at the moment. The project I was working on is on hiatus until a vaccine is found, pretty much.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of us are in the same boat of just kind of being embarrassed of where we're at.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of this strange limbo space. I know myself, I'm half working, but like it doesn't feel like it.
No. Yeah, it's a weird time, and it was weirdly abrupt as well. It's like pushing, and then nothing. So yeah, it's an odd time, but it's also been a good time to, I guess, reflect and get creative, draw. And I've been talking with friends, it's a fantastic time to draw because it's such an amorphous blob of time that you can just roll with it as long as you want to and just leave it on your table for 2 weeks and come back to it. It's been great. So
Nice.
that's wonderful. Yeah.
So drawing, reading, and I noticed that you have a Pinterest page.
I have an obsessive Pinterest page, in fact, you could say.
Yes. And so the way this panned out is one of my friends texted me immediately and said, you have to interview Alyssum about her Pinterest page. So I took a look at it, and it is expansive.
It is. I was going to say it's a lot. It's a lot, and I don't really know where people start with it. So it's funny because actually in this downtime, I'm working on this page on my site to help explain my Pinterest, which is why it came up with your friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you tell me about it? What's going on?
So I use Pinterest. It's funny because like Pinterest is this site that's like mostly for like house projects and like recipes and how to bake something and traditionally it was like how to design your wedding, right? There's a lot of like
Yes, I think
mason jars. Yeah. Yeah, it's that. But what I love about it is that it's sort of the first way I started to use Pinterest and mood boards in general is as a mind palace. So if I wanted to remember this particular chair that I saw or some sort of design that I really liked, if I could have a folder, a collection to put it in, and I put it in there just by placing it somewhere, I would be able to recall it later on. So like a mind palace is that mnemonic device where you want to remember something, you imagine a house in your brain and you put it in a particular room in order to recall it again. So Pinterest sort of worked for me that way, in which I could, I remember I put that on this color board and I could pull it up if I was in a meeting with a client or suggesting a design change or showing someone something cool.
Yeah, that's really useful.
Yeah, it was super useful. And I still use it that way. But it's also expanded to be sort of a act of creation in itself. And the way I look at it is very much through an art history lens where, I get a vibe where there's some sort of formal, physical, or color problem that some design has solved quite well, and I want to break down why it's working and look at the different elements. And in art history, you're taught to look at the lighting, look at the the brush strokes, the figure ground relationship, all these elements. And so applying that to works of design or contemporary works of art or architecture, and parsing the images and the designs in this way helps to, I think, build also better products when you start from that reference of visual research and build upon it. So yeah.
When you're putting stuff into your boards, you have so many categories. How do you organize this, and how do you create your categories?
The categories in my brain, some of them came up pretty naturally. Like, so the first ones that sort of came into being are like, furniture, or like little things or big things, which I just said, like things that can fit in your hand, things that can't fit in your hand, pretty much. Or like fashion or architecture, those sorts of things happen very naturally. But then when it came to color, then there's a color board, and then material boards, and then those sort of expanded. So it tends to fall into either form, color, material, or theme, or survey, I call them, like big collection, fashion, architecture, or yada yada, a larger collection. And the theme ones are probably the most creatively fun for me, because they're more ambiguous. They're more like, I could walk you through one of my favorites, which is called New Human, and it was.
I can pull it up. I actually have it here if you'd like.
Sure. I also have the page for it on my website done, so I can also
sick.
The explanation. So let's just look at it in general.
Cool.
And then I can break it down.
New Human.
Yeah. It's a lot. Right there, you just saw it. You just pressed it.
Yes, alphabetical.
There it is. Yeah, okay. So what I love about this board, the tagline for it is sticky, pink, and invasive. And what I love about this board is that I didn't have an objective. This is one of those boards where I was just seeing these images kind of float past, my feed and stuff, and cultivating the feed that I have was also a big endeavor, because that was very much about training the algorithm into giving me things that I was actually interested in. And that's just taken years. Yeah, so all these images that were a very particular vein of sci-fi, and when they were paired with something sometimes very cozy or attractive, there's this uneasy, uncanny valley sort of thing that I love. I love it. So what I love about this board is that it started from kind of nothing. I just started throwing images into an empty collection. I think I usually make them private at first when I'm just sort of figuring out what the brain wants, and started to see what the sort of connections were, and what was working together. Like it's really interesting to find, the body modifications and these different things that come together. And I can, do you mind if I share my screen?
Go, please.
Cool. Oh, it's disabled.
Let me, let's see. I think I can do this.
These Zoom days.
I know, Jesus. All right. Give privileges. All right. Oh my goodness. How embarrassing.
Is it? I feel like I'm way more embarrassed.
All right, so.
Got it?
Yes.
I can also just send you the link of it. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, I also have like everything of it. Okay, so now that you've seen that board in general, this is how, if I'm giving a presentation for a client, I convert the use of Pinterest. So I have this like giant collection that is kind of a sensory bombardment. And then I usually give an introduction like this, which is, at the time, as these images are coming together, I think it was mostly because I was reading Dun and Raby's book, Speculative Everything, which is like this, they have this quote in it that I love, and it's, every object is an artifact from a possible world. It's a possible future. So what
That's
I love,
so cool.
oh my God, it's it's my favorite. They even like say like it's a synecdoche. It serves for laws, cultures of this possible world. And it's one of the things I love most about design, is because I feel like if we see something designed for our bodies and we can put ourselves into it, that possible future becomes so much clearer to us. So people can do paintings of a possible radioactive wasteland, and you can look at it and maybe feel some anxiety, but I think it's much scarier to see a gas mask with a price tag on it on a Target shelf that is like floral patterned or something, because it puts it in our world in an approachability and a desirability that is very unnerving to us. And it's more something we use in our everyday lives. We don't have to imagine very far. So taking that concept and also taking that unease is sort of where that started with this. And when I'm presenting a concept like this, I will break it down into these larger general themes that come out. So as I'm watching this collection build itself, I'm noticing themes like synthetic organics, where we explore the uncanny valley and what's natural and what's unnatural, and how we hack our bodies and give this familiar, eerie edge to biomorphism. And then on the counter side, this sort of hopeful world where science can save the world and we can run with it. And then also looking at like desire and control, and how many things on this board became like sticky or sexy or sweet looking, and pinks and oranges, like these citrusy colors. And that added to this sort of eerie undertone to everything on top, that it was very sweet, and yet we surrender all this control to every sweet indulgence. So that's sort of how a board like this gets broken up in my brain, and then the collection as a whole just continues to build on those themes.
Yeah, it's very inspiring to look at.
Oh,
and
thank you.
As far as just like collected things and this new almost tone that comes from seeing all of these things in one place. Thanks. Where are you getting these images?
Mostly through Pinterest. But like I said earlier, I've cultivated the feed that I have for quite a long time. So, and there are a couple like Dezeen and Design Milk, like some old school sort of design blogs all have a feed, much like they have an Instagram account, much like they have a Twitter account. They usually upload things directly into Pinterest. And then I follow other people's collections, and that can be really rewarding, but takes a lot more time. So if there's a designer that I find on Instagram, for example, like I love the Design Academy Eindhoven. They do lots of weird stuff in the Netherlands. So I follow a bunch of people who've come from that school, and then they follow other people who go to that school. And I've, the way that I think we've all built our Instagrams as creative people. And then I will often look if they have an account on Pinterest, and then see what they're looking at, and then follow very specific boards, and have that feed into my feed. So yeah, it's from other people. It's from, bigger publications as well. I think I also will like send myself an image that I really like, especially if it's weird and different, or I really like following also fashion lines for the same reason, because they push boundaries so much, and it's so much fun to use fashion as sort of an anchor point for a lot of these, especially when I'm working on something with an aesthetic, something like New Human that I just showed you. If I'm doing something more, like I have a couple boards for like form, or for probably the most useful board that I have for like my professional life is, there are two. There's seams and transitions. and they're just where two parts come together. And it can either be like a material transition or the same material, but two parts, uniting. And how that happens is so important in design. Like if it's capturing the edge of fabric, or if it's capturing two plastic parts being mated together, or if it's a perforated screen on a speaker, what does the edge look like? It's always, I think all design is really made in the edges of things. And so looking at just making a collection of just over time, when I'm not even thinking about it, just shoving things into a board over time. And when I need to think about like, we got to make a transition, how can we do that? I just open this board and I have hundreds of products specifically focused on interesting transitions in their parts.
Yeah. It's like the Austin Kleon swipe file almost. It's just where it's a catalog of everything you like that you can draw on when you need.
Right. And then that Mind Palace thing comes in handy again, because it could be like, where was that thing? Like, oh yeah, that one is in the seam folder because it has this cool thing, and blah, blah, blah. Like I can pull it up very easily as well. So I can collect everything I love and be able to recall it a lot more easily.
As far as like design goes, how did you get into this field?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I've ever met an industrial designer that was just like, oh, I wanted to do this since I was 5. Like no one knows it exists. It's pretty funny. So both of my parents are artists. My dad is a stained glass artist and my mother's a landscape painter. But she also worked in production lines in the fashion industry in New York during the 80s. And so because of that, I grew up outside New York, in the suburbs, in this tiny cottage that had no heater. We had a wood burning stove, and our dining room table was a baby grand piano that we pulled up bar stools to.
Oh my God.
Our dishes would shake when my dad would play the piano in the morning. It was quite a romantic lifestyle. Very, very bohemian. And there are like material samples everywhere. My dad was constantly bringing home, things that he'd sandblasted, things he'd acid etched, little samples of stained glass that he'd made to pitch for a job or something like that. And my mom's making textiles and painting the stairs pink, and her paintings are everywhere. Yeah, it was an amazing upbringing and an amazing education. And I started studying art history in high school because I was so excited to have a vocabulary that my parents were using every day. We would go to the Met on the weekends because the New York City was like 10 miles away. And we go to the Met, we would go to the Cooper Hewitt, and there are a couple exhibitions at the Cooper Hewitt that got me really interested in design. Particularly a conversation with a landscape architect I met through one of their events. And yeah, it just kind of happened. I knew I was going to study art. I accidentally double majored in art history because I just took so many classes. I got enough credits. I was like, oh. Okay. And once I took my intro to design class, that I was like, I want to go to art school and art history, and then I'll go to grad school for architecture. And actually a school advisor said, like, just try this intro to design course. And I remember the moment sitting in the lecture where I was like, fuck architecture. Like, I mean, architecture is great, but like, this, I want to do this.
This is so cool.
Right now. I want to do this right now for the rest of my life. And if I don't get into this program, I'm going somewhere else to do this. Like, I need to do this. So yeah, and the rest is sort of history.
Design, like, to me, is like one of those, it's such a broad term. Mm-hmm. But still, like, when I meet someone who's like in design, I'm like, oh, that's the coolest thing you could possibly do. Like, what about it was so cool to you?
Well, there are a couple things so I know I love drawing and I love art, and grew up drawing a lot, but I never could draw things that I felt. It was funny. It's like I didn't have the same emotional connection with visuals, and I loved writing. I loved art history. I loved making arguments. Like I loved having a debate about why this was this way, and here's the evidence, and so I loved art and I loved making things, and these like, design is so interdisciplinary. So as much as it's a creative act and it's art, it's also looking at the engineering constraints and looking at, you know, having to work in CAD, having to draw and do user research and make an argument for why this solution is better than another solution and go through the problem solving steps in a visual or formal way is so delicious to me.
Yeah.
I love working on it. So
the thing that I'm curious about is like, I talk to a lot of artists, and there is almost this friction between doing art and doing art for money.
Yes.
And I'm curious what like your paid gigs are like, or how you manage that friction.
This is a great question in design also.
Okay, great.
What's interesting about design is in design school, everyone I know who went to design school, many people there do it because, oh, this is a form of art I can do where I can get a job that pays. And they are right to a degree. But what is funny about it is like, there's this belief that like, oh, if you're a designer, hashtag design life, like this is my heart and soul. I am working on things that are changing the world and matter so much to me, and I'm going to get a job doing exactly what I love. And it's insidious because I talk to a lot of students, and I, you know, was one, you know, like 6 years ago, where I thought that was the case. And that's true to a degree, but like any job, there's parts of it that you don't care about or you don't personally invest in. And there's a real burnout, especially where I'm at now in my career, where like at around 5 years in the world, all my friends had a similar experience where they had to start like, crap, how do I start carving time out for my life so that I have creative endeavors that are not this? Because there are parts of me that are getting sucked into this that are really exciting, but then the budget runs out, then marketing says it can't be this color, then XYZ, and your heart gets broken and you have to compromise on your creative or artistic instincts. And so it's very good to have other things to satisfy that side, so that even though it can be really fun to problem solve, and I love working on big teams and learning from other people, and it's so fun, but it is also, you need the balance in your personal work as well.
So it's almost like having both of those going at the same time is like, do it for the love and then bring that to your professional endeavor.
And honestly, even I have friends that work on design projects that they just hate. A lot of people leave design. Actually, and when I say design, I specifically mean industrial design. But I find a lot of people leave it because they get burned out, and because some of my friends have been like, I want to like quit and go start a farm. Like I literally have a friend who's considering that right now, because it's like, I want to do honest work that begins and ends and it's not all encompassing, and it's not taking away my creative energy either. Because that's another thing that people have trouble with, is you wind up pouring a lot of your creative soul into something you don't believe in, and then you come home and you're too tired to do your personal projects.
Right. So like
the challenge.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a solution.
There isn't. there isn't. It's life. It's, you know, I think it's important. I wish someone had been clearer with me about that in school. I don't know if I would have done anything differently, because I'm still so passionate about this. And it's funny. So I remember, Connor, you told me about the Design Your Life book.
Yes.
So I got it. And I was like doing one of the just like, what is your work? What is it? Your like work philosophy and your life philosophy. And I was writing out my like work philosophy and where I'd like to work and what would I like to do. And it was always this, like, no matter what I do, it always comes back to, I love making things. Yeah. And I want to spend all day doing it.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, that like, there's so much to work with there. And like, I almost don't know where to go next. I think one thing that I thought of while looking at your Pinterest board was Hanya Yanagihara, who wrote A Little Life. Have you read A Little Life? But I thought of her while looking through your boards because she put together a Pinterest board to help inform the writing of her novel.
Oh, interesting.
Which I loved. And I guess I'm just a stranger to Pinterest, and I'm curious, how long have you been on it?
I started my Pinterest in school, so I guess it's been 7 years now that I've had this up. And I've seen, like, I saw it like go through this popular streak, and it's much less popular now than I would say it was, even among my design friends, just who's posting and
oh yeah, just as far as like a tool.
Yeah. I do know that because my Pinterest is very much set up to be functional from a design and brainstorm standpoint, many of my friends use my Pinterest now. They go for their brainstorming, which is great. I'm happy.
I mean, you have over 2,000 followers. Let's see, like,
it's not crazy, but it's nice. But I have seen it go through waves, and not a lot of people are adding to it a lot anymore. And even I have, after building it this big, I do maintain it, but I'm not as active as I was in the earlier years. But yeah, it's Pinterest is also a funny thing because I think you'll see on my boards, and as you saw on like that one board we walked through, I really like weird shit. And so what I really love to do is bring that weird shit into the corporate.
Yes.
It's really funny because like I've described my family. They're a bunch of artists, bohemians. My sister's also an artist. I am like the most corporate person in my family. And then as soon as I leave my family, I am the most artistic person in any design, meeting room, because it's been great. It's great to walk that path.
Can you give me an example of bringing the weird?
Okay. Famously, and I'm not going to say it was famous at my last company. So I worked at a startup called Human for 4 years down in Soto. And we were making these wearable headphones that had an elastomer piece that sat behind the ears for, hours at a time. And we're thinking about different materials to source and different things to look at for inspiration as we're building up the CMF library. I specialize in colors, materials, and finishes, which is CMF. And I forget to explain that sometimes. But so we're building up the CMF library, and I told my boss, I'm like, I mean this seriously, and I'm not trying to be crude, but I think we should look at sex toys. And I went to Babeland and bought a vibrator, which was the funniest conversation. Because I mean, it is actually a really cool place to go in and talk about materials and also user experience, because having to plug in one of these devices, like all their chargers are different and all of their controls are different. You have to be able to navigate them in the dark and by touch. It's very cool. But and then as I'm buying it, she's like, don't use a silicone lube. And I'm like, no, it's for work. like, she's like, sure it is. Okay, well, don't. Okay. So I became sort of famous at Human for like the vibrator sat in the library with everything else, and we used it. We bought a second one and cut it up and sent it to vendors, and that's how we came up with the finish that's on our elastomers. It's both the texture. At one point there was a paint, but we decided to remove that. And it was because they sampled this sex toy, and they were able to create a feeling that was similar. So
that's super cool.
Yeah, so that's probably the weirdest thing I've done professionally. In general, if we're brainstorming an idea, even if it's something simple like part transitions, like how are we going to, like, we have to resolve this issue here that we're seeing, we have to add this thing, how are we going to think about this project, in the early stages even, especially if it's in the early stage, I bring all the weird. When we were specifically looking at Human, and how to attach to the ear, I made like dozens of mood boards just of like weird cuff jewelry and like different things that like, and some of it was very sci-fi, some of it were like elf ears, some of it were how could this attach in all these different ways, how does it break our brain to really think of things outside the box, you know.
As they always ask.
About it. But I find it really, I also think I have this other board called Haptic, and it is blatantly stolen from my favorite designer of all time, Kenya Hara, he did a whole exhibition just based on like sensory experience. I'm trying to see if I can find an image. So it's you know, these like tissues made of snake skin and lots of like very tactile, touchable, squishy, gross sort of this like plug that looks like a baby. So the whole this whole exhibition was the purpose of it was to not just solve a problem or make someone happy or sad or whatever, but to inspire, like, how do you make something that makes someone feel something viscerally? And it is one of my favorite things in design, is to how do you like short circuit and like have a spinal reaction, like people that just is like innate and in people's guts. And I think that as designers, we don't often think about disgust or like any kind of revulsion or unease or uncanniness. And I have a couple different boards, but particularly my Haptic board on there that is about collecting all these different things together that give me that feeling. Because I think it's important to pick apart, because we can inspire a sense of touch even without looking at something. It's how we guided the design of the headphone and the paint and the certain surface quality so that it looked so smooth, like without even touching it. You wanted to just like wrap your hands around it and just roll it around in your hand. And that was from some of these boards that had creepier, disgusting, visceral things, like just by like getting us into that headspace and also breaking down these images much in like the way you do in art history. Why is this happening? What is effective about it? How do we bring that to our own product? But obviously taking steps back from the creepy and weird or even overly cozy and cute, and apply that in more refined and intentional details.
Yeah, you venture into these uncharted, bizarre territories and come back with gold.
Exactly. It's definitely like go deep and come back.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that was fun because also in making that product, that's the first product that I got to work on the manufacturing for as well in my career. And that intention was started, you know, early on to make it feel like a Riverstone. And that got carried, as I said, into the paint quality and the way we did things like that. But it also got carried into even the manufacturing details. So that it was toleranced in such a way so that if the two parts didn't line up, they could only have a tolerance in one direction, so that as you ran your hands over it, you'd never feel a step from the two parts interacting. So it got even down into the details of how each individual plastic component was made and then put together.
That's so cool. Did this product make it to market?
It did.
Oh, cool.
It did, and then it didn't anymore.
Oh.
Yeah, I have a couple of them and like a whole box of prototypes too. But it launched around this time last year. I don't know how many we sold. I had left the company last April because I'd been at a startup for 4 years and I was burned out. I just needed to step away. Once I saw final manufacturing through, I walked away. And it was honestly like the product missed so many marks. Like we'd spent so long developing it. We hadn't had the right engineering help from the get-go. Our chip manufacturer decided to stop supporting active noise canceling, which for a $400 headphone
is necessary.
It killed it dead in the water. It was just like, and we had no clout. We were a small startup. We couldn't make them change their mind. So So once it launched, I wasn't surprised that it fizzled out and the company, dissolved and all that. But fantastic education.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they say. It's like all failures are.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, not that it's a failure. It seems like it was super enriching. But what a time. Startups, who like failure, who knows? I want to wrap up by just asking you what's your ideal next move? I know like everything is super uncertain, but it seems like you're in a position to like try to figure out what your next step is. Do you have any idea of what that looks like for you?
Yeah, I'm applying to a couple jobs right now. They tend to be more traditional CMF roles. I've been working as an art director, and I really do like art direction, creative direction. Eventually in my career, I'd love to do creative direction because it's taking all of the orchestration of these themes and this inspiration and really guiding other people through it. It's probably my favorite part of what I did at Human. But I still have, I'm excited to learn a lot more about manufacturing and about specific materials. And so I've been hunting around. I've been looking at sportswear because I also love the intersection of fashion. I've been looking at consumer electronics again because that's where my experience is, and certainly a place I could always dive deeper into. But sticking with, for the meantime, I'm sticking with colors, materials, and finishes. I love nerding out on materials and even figuring out the chemistry behind them and how things are made. And we'll continue to go down that path and keep feeding my independent creative projects and keep building toward a role as a creative director someday. I think that's the current plan. It changes like every week.
Yeah, so it's gotta.
tomorrow I'm gonna like become a landscape architect or like fashion design.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for sharing your Pinterest board, your process, and a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Connor. Super fun.
Absolutely. And you can find the Pinterest at Alyssum Q. I'll put a link in the description.
And if you want to check out my portfolio, it's just alyssum.design.
Yep. Well. It's a designy website.
It is very designy.
Really good. Thanks so much, Alyssum.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.